Were you the child that no one saw? Find out how it still shapes your life. There's a type of pain that does not leave a bruise, but leaves a mark. It is the pain of the rejected child, the one who grows up inside his own home feeling out of place, as if you were always taking up too much or too little space. Maybe no one said "I don't love you," but the silence, the comparison, and the coldness spoke loudly. And that shapes everything: the way she loves, how she works, how she sees herself in the mirror. What few people realize is that the experience of an unloved child is not stuck in the past. It becomes a lens. It becomes a filter. It becomes standard. Parental rejection can turn into abandonment anxiety, low self-esteem, a desperate search for belonging that never seems enough. And the most curious and painful thing is that many of these people become functional adults, productive, even admired. But inside they still carry the open wounds of childhood. Science explains. Philosophy questions. Attachment theory shows how early attachments shape our future relationships. Neuroscience reveals that rejection activates the same areas of physical pain in the brain. It's not drama. It is not weakness. It's biology mixed with emotional history. And when this childhood trauma is not understood, it manifests itself as self-sabotage, constant fear of losing the one you love, and difficulty trusting even in one's own achievements. But here's the good news, and perhaps the most powerful part of this conversation: what's been learned can also be relearned. There is a path called reparenting, a practice of offering oneself the care that was lacking. There is a real possibility of emotional healing, of developing a secure attachment even after a childhood marked by rejection. The question is not whether you have been loved enough. The question is, what do you do with this story now? He's sitting at the table with his family, but it's as if no one really sees him. The conversation turns, the laughter echoes, the eyes cross except with him. The rejected child learns early on that he can be physically present and yet be emotionally invisible. And that hurts. But no one notices, because she also learns not to show it. Sometimes it's not screaming or open aggression. It's the lack of interest, the subtle comparison, the impatient sigh when he starts talking. The unloved child picks up on these details as if deciphering secret codes. She concludes, in the silence of her own mind, "There's something wrong with me." And so an internal narrative begins to form that later feeds low self-esteem and the chronic feeling of not belonging. If you identify with this scene, do a simple exercise: close your eyes for a moment and visualize this table. Where are you sitting? What do you wish someone had said? This small act of awareness is already the first step towards emotional healing. Because before we talk about childhood trauma or parental rejection, we need to recognize the initial scene, the one where invisibility began. And that still echoes in his relationships today. Love is not a luxury. Belonging is not emotional freshness. For a rejected child, belonging is as essential as food and shelter. The infant brain understands acceptance as synonymous with survival. When there is parental rejection, the internal system goes on alert, as if to say something threatens my safety. Neuroscience shows that social exclusion activates brain areas similar to those of physical pain. In other words, that feeling of tightness in the chest of the unloved child is not an exaggeration, it is pure biology. The lack of a secure bond can plant seeds of abandonment anxiety that accompany a person throughout their lives. And this impacts choices, friendships, and even professional opportunities. If you want to start rebuilding that sense of belonging, start small. Seek out environments where your voice is heard: a reading group, therapy, communities with common interests. Books like The Courage to Be Imperfect, by Brené Brown, help to understand vulnerability and connection. Because when we talk about childhood wounds, we also talk about the most basic human need: to feel that we have a place in the world. and that we need not beg for it. The way we have been cared for shapes the way we have learned to love. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby, shows that early attachments create an internal map of who we are and what to expect from others. For the rejected child, this chart may register something painful: love is unstable, or I need to deserve attention. And, without realizing it, this belief becomes identity. The unloved child does not think rationally, my parents failed. She thinks, I'm the problem. This is how parental rejection turns into low self-esteem and, often, self-sabotage in adult life. The person avoids exposing themselves, fears getting attached, or, on the contrary, gets too attached for fear of abandonment anxiety. All this because the initial attachment taught that bond is synonymous with risk. But hey, something powerful: attachment can be reconfigured. Therapy, healthy relationships, and reparenting practices help build the so-called acquired secure attachment. A good start is to observe your patterns. Do you run away when someone gets too close? Or do you despair when you feel distance? Becoming aware already weakens automatism. Because understanding the origin of childhood trauma does not erase the past, but it completely changes the way you write the next chapter. The rejected child almost never accuses his parents. She accuses herself. If the affection doesn't come, she concludes, I wasn't good enough. If there's coldness, he thinks, I must be too difficult. This is how parental rejection ceases to be an external behavior and becomes an internal identity. Over time, the unloved child turns isolated experiences into permanent labels. I'm boring. I'm invisible. I am insufficient. This silent narrative feeds low self-esteem and creates fertile ground for self-sabotage. After all, if deep down she believes she doesn't deserve love, any opportunity for happiness seems almost dangerous. Want to start breaking this pattern? Pay attention to your inner voice. When something goes wrong, do you attack yourself or welcome yourself? A practical exercise is to write down the automatic phrases that arise in your mind and ask, is this fact or is it an echo of my childhood wounds? This simple distinction already makes room for emotional healing. Because, when rejection becomes identity, the first step is to separate who you are from what they did to you. Few things hurt as much as growing up feeling that love at home has a different measure. The rejected child notices when his sibling is praised easily while he receives constant criticism. Sometimes no one admits favoritism, but the atmosphere delivers. And this silent difference reinforces the idea that she is the unloved child of the story. Constant comparison creates invisible competition. The child starts to measure his or her worth based on performance, trying to compensate for parental rejection with high grades, impeccable behavior, or, in some cases, strategic rebelliousness. The result? Low self-esteem masked by perfectionism or indifference. Inside, though, the question remains, why am I never enough? If this was part of your childhood, try a liberating exercise. Write down your qualities without comparing yourself to anyone else. Neither brother, nor colleague, nor idealized standard. You are not a dispute. Books such as Brilliant Parents, Fascinating Teachers, by Augusto Curry, help to understand family dynamics and emotions. Because acknowledging how effective inequality fueled your childhood wounds is an essential step in rebuilding your sense of belonging without having to compete for it. When we talk about rejected children, we're not just talking about emotion, we're talking about biology. Repeated experiences of parental rejection can leave the brain in a constant state of alert. The amygdala, responsible for detecting threats, tends to become more sensitive. Result? The person grows up interpreting small signs as big risks. The prefrontal cortex, which helps with emotional regulation, may have difficulty stopping this internal alarm when childhood trauma has been intense. This is where hypervigilance comes from, analyzing every unanswered message, every change in tone, every silence. Abandonment anxiety doesn't come out of nowhere, it's the echo of a nervous system that learned early on that bonding can mean pain. But here comes something powerful: the brain is plastic, it reorganizes itself. Practices such as meditation, cognitive behavioral therapy, and breathing exercises help regulate this state of alertness. A simple start? When you feel anxiety rise, stop and name what's happening. This is an activated memory, not a real danger. This awareness initiates emotional healing and weakens the impact of childhood wounds. And, by understanding what the brain does, it is easier to understand the strategies that arise to survive. In the face of pain, the rejected child does not stop, he adapts. Some become too responsible little adults, trying to win love through perfection. Others learn to please everyone by saying yes even when they want to shout no. And there are also those who choose rebellion, as if to say, if I can't be loved, at least I'll be noticed. These are all strategies to deal with parental rejection. The problem is that these masks work. To a certain extent. Perfectionism can bring recognition, but it also fuels low self-esteem because it's never enough. The need to please generates exhaustion and reinforces the anxiety of abandonment. Rebellion, on the other hand, can hide a silent request for belonging. Deep down, the unloved child only wants one thing: to feel that he is worthy of love without having to perform. How about starting by identifying your dominant strategy? Observe your patterns. Do you try to control everything? Do you avoid conflicts at any cost? Or does it push people away before they can abandon you? Writing about it is already an act of reparenting. It's you looking at your own childhood wounds with maturity. And when you understand the function of these masks, you begin to realize how they continue to influence your choices in adult life. What is not resolved in childhood tends to be repeated in adult life. The rejected child grows up, but the pattern continues to operate behind the scenes. Without realizing it, she may choose partners who are critical, emotionally distant, or unavailable figures that reactivate the old parental rejection. It is as if the unconscious tries to reenact the pain in the hope of achieving a different ending this time. The unloved child within the adult feels an almost magnetic attraction to relationships that confirm his old beliefs. If back then he learned that love needs to be conquered, now he can accept effective crumbs. If they have experienced insecurity, they develop intense anxiety of abandonment, interpreting any distance as a threat. And so, unintentionally, he perpetuates his own self-sabotage. But there is a turning point: awareness. Start by looking at your patterns of choice. Ask yourself, is this love or is it familiarity? Therapies focused on attachment and books like Love or Depend by Walter Riso help to identify dysfunctional bonds. This process is part of emotional healing and reparenting. It's you learning to give your story a different outcome. Because, when the cycle is identified, it begins to lose strength. And the next relationship no longer has to be a repeat of the past. There are families that, on the outside, seem perfectly normal. Smiling photos, commemorative dates, everything in order. But inside, the rejected child learns that his feelings are exaggerated. When she tries to express pain, she hears phrases like, "You're too sensitive," or "That never happened." This is the terrain of emotional gaslighting, the subtle invalidation that erodes one's perception of one's own reality. The unloved child begins to doubt his own memory and his own pain. If he feels sad, but is told that there is no reason, internal confusion arises. Over time, this intensifies low self-esteem and strengthens abandonment anxiety, because trusting one's feelings seems risky. Parental rejection is no longer explicit but psychological, almost invisible, but profoundly impactful. If you've lived through this, an essential step is to validate your own experience. Write down situations that marked your childhood wounds and describe how you felt, without minimizing it. Therapy helps, but you can start now. Change I'm exaggerating to my feeling makes sense. This movement is part of reparenting. You become the voice that welcomes, not invalidates. And when pain is no longer denied, it begins to transform. Preparing the ground to understand something even deeper about belonging. Not belonging isn't just uncomfortable, it's disorganizing. The rejected child grows up with the feeling of always being outside, even when he is in the center. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard talked about the silent despair of not being fully oneself. And that's exactly what happens when the unloved child learns to mold himself to fit. Neuroscience confirms something striking: rejection activates regions in the brain associated with physical pain. In other words, when we talk about parental rejection, we're not exaggerating, we're describing an experience that the whole body feels. The absence of belonging deepens low self-esteem and feeds abandonment anxiety, creating an almost desperate search for external validation. But true belonging starts within. A practical exercise: list values that are non-negotiable for you. Not what they expect from you, but what makes sense in their essence. Participating in groups aligned with these values strengthens authentic bonds and supports emotional healing. Because when you understand that you don't need to distort yourself to be accepted, you begin to rebuild what the wounds of childhood tried to steal: the right to exist as you are. And that's when we enter the most transformative process of all. We have reached a decisive point. If there was a lack of care back then, today you can learn to offer it to yourself. This is where reparenting comes in, the process of becoming the secure adult that the rejected child needed. It is not pretending that nothing happened, nor eternally blaming parental rejection. It is taking responsibility for one's own emotional healing, with firmness and compassion. In practice, this means talking to yourself as you would talking to a vulnerable child. When abandonment anxiety arises, instead of criticizing yourself, you can say, "I'm here. You're not alone." It sounds simple, but for those who grew up as an unloved child, this self-acceptance is revolutionary. Small rituals help: writing letters to yourself, setting healthy limits, taking care of your body and routine as a gesture of love. Attachment-based therapies, reading about attachment theory, and self-compassion practices strengthen this new inner bond. The goal is not to erase the wounds of childhood, but to integrate them into your story without them commanding your choices. Gradually, low self-esteem loses strength, self-sabotage decreases, and something different emerges: security built from the inside out. And when that inner base changes, your identity also begins to transform. There is a moment when the rejected child stops being just a victim of his own story and begins to become the author of it. This does not mean denying parental rejection or minimizing childhood trauma. It means looking at everything that happened and saying, "This marked me, but it won't define me forever." And this change in posture is powerful. The unloved child who carried low self-esteem and lived in abandonment anxiety begins to realize that he can choose differently. It can set limits, select healthier relationships, and interrupt cycles of self-sabotage. The past explains a lot, but it doesn't have to determine the future. When there is consciousness, there is choice, and choice is freedom. Maybe you never had the belonging you deserved back then. But today it can build a new sense of belonging based on values, secure relationships, and the continuous practice of reparenting. Emotional healing does not erase the wounds of childhood, but transforms pain into maturity and sensitivity. And when you assume authorship of the narrative itself, something silently changes. The story is no longer about rejection. It's about rebuilding. Now I want to ask you a sincere question: how many of your choices are still being guided by the pain of the rejected child that you were? How many decisions, relationships, or fears are actually echoes of childhood wounds that were never fully looked at? Realizing this is not weakness, it is emotional maturity. and maturity is the first step of true emotional healing. You can't go back in time to change parental rejection, but you can decide what you do with it today. You can practice reparenting, you can build healthier bonds, you can interrupt cycles of self-sabotage. The question that remains is, will you keep repeating history? Or will you start writing it consciously? If this content made sense to you, share it with someone who also needs to understand their own story. And, of course, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to continue deepening your journey of self-knowledge. Because understanding the psychology of the unloved child is just the beginning. The next step is to live like the adult who chooses belonging, safety, and transformation.